Final reader tonight is Rachel Pastan. Her most recent novel, Elena, was named an editor's choice on the New York Times Book Review. She is also the author of two other novels, Lady of the Snakes and This Side of Married. She attended the Iowa Writers Workshop and taught for many years as part of the core faculty of the Bennington Writers Seminar, low residency MFA program. From 2011 to 2014, she served as editor-at-large at the Institute of Contemporary Art at Penn, where she wrote the behind-the-scenes at the museum blog, Miranda. She currently teaches at Swarthmore College. Please welcome Rachel Pastan.
Last night, I dreamed of Naclasset again. It was dusk. Somewhere beyond the scrubby hills full of brambles and beach plums and pine trees bent and twisted by the sea wind like old men, the sun was going down over the bay. From where I stood on the sandy shoulder of the two-lane highway, I couldn't see it, but I could feel the damp chill take hold of the afternoon. The light faded from clear gold to misty gray, the way everything fades there, the shingled houses and the wooden docks, and the leathery skin of the Cape Cod women who lead their lives in the abrasive broth of salt and sun, whose brows furrow early from so much squinting against the light. There I stood on the edge of the road, blue-black asphalt holding the heat. I could smell the tar melting, smell the pines and the brine of the sea, the restless, pungent, ever-present sea, primordial source of life and cause of so much death, floods and riptides, shipwrecks and suicides. Suddenly, the gates began to swing from the two great weathered posts, the lovely gates by Simeon Wetzler that Bernard commissioned right at the beginning. Each plank of silvery wood was carved with reliefs of animals, strata by strata, starfish and conchs along the bottom, deer and foxes and porcupines at chest level, and along the top, the birds of the local woods and seashore, most of which I didn't recognize. I was never much of a naturalist, having early on turned my eye to art. Though this has changed in recent years, along with so much else, so that today I can follow a path up a Napa hillside and turn to note a swallowtail or a red-bellied woodpecker, and even Bernard can be persuaded to admire a hummingbird balanced in midair above the swaying bee balm in his own small garden. Those gates were the first thing I loved about Naclasset, the first night Bernard brought me there, and in the dream I was thrilled to see them again. But as I put out my hand to push open the gate, I saw that the shadows had tricked me. The gate sagged from the weary posts held together with iron chains. I cried out in sorrow even as, it being a dream, I passed like water through the barrier and found myself on the other side, walking as I had so many times up the rutted lane. The first quarter of a mile or so was paved, though the color of the old asphalt had faded to a pale gray. Even when the knock was at its peak, the lane, rising and falling among the dunes, was kept primitive and rough, like most roads leading out of the bay. When it rained, huge muddy puddles gaped, and repeat visitors learned to leave their cars in the dirt lot by the road and walk. The wave rose and fell. After the second rise, you could hear the sea. It poured itself onto the breast of the shore and then drew back, gave itself and drew back. It would not stay, and it would not keep away, so that the unhappy shore could never possess, could never forget. Or maybe it was the shore's pale indifference that drove the sea wild, so that every so often she whipped herself into a hurricane or a nor'easter, wreaking her vengeance indiscriminately. Just so an artist, ignored too long by a callous world, may break into brilliance, or flame up into cynical stuntsmanship, or drop herself like a stone down the dark well of despair. Once contained by gardeners, the scrub was growing wild. The restless wind rattled the dry leaves, and the crickets sang their elegy to summer. On I walked, my feet slipping in the sand, the grass that grew along the central hump in the lane tickling my bare legs. And then I rounded a bend, and there was the knock before me, the long shingled building with the great windows facing the sea. For half a moment, time seemed to coil inward like a spring, present and past, dream and reality coming together, so that I felt I was seeing the place for the first time again, its serene yet lively beauty, its strange angular shapes made almost natural by the vernacular shingle. Then the moon sailed out from behind the tattered clouds, and I saw that the place was abandoned. The roof was stove in, the glass shattered, even the walls blown away in places. The building looked like a wrecked ship sitting high up on that long dune, a rich merchant vessel perhaps, whose cargo of spices or gold had been doomed from the start. Of course, Naquasset has been lost to me for a long time now, if it was ever mine. These days, Bernard and I run a little gallery in Russian Hill, estate work mostly with a focus on the Bay Area Figurative School. Not for us any longer the drama of the living artist with her hopes and dreams, her anxieties and insecurities and inexplicable demands. We deal exclusively in the work of the dead. I live in a small apartment with a view of this very different bay, and Bernard has a bungalow in Sausalito. Even after all that happened, he likes to take the ferry to work. He has recovered his fondness for boats. In the mornings, I stop at the French bakery halfway up the hill and pick up cafe au lait and rolls, and we have breakfast together in the office before the gallery opens. Bernard has grown stouter and, of course, grayer. His head is completely silver now, and he has grown a mustache. His resemblance to a walrus is striking, but he seems happy enough, as am I, happy enough. If Bernard has lovers, he keeps them to himself. As for me, I have a man I see from time to time. He travels a great deal for his job, but when he's in town and he calls, I make him dinner, which we eat on a little Pacific-facing balcony, and then we go to bed. As love affairs go, it's not remarkable, but it suits me. I'm always happy when his name pops up on my caller ID, but I'm equally glad to wave goodbye in the morning and head up the hill where Bernard will be cursing at his email. I'll look over the papers and read out to him any item of interest from the Chronicle or the Times. We particularly enjoy reading about the bad behavior of our colleagues suspected of trafficking in suspiciously acquired art or carrying on too public an affair with the wife of a famous painter. An article about tax fraud can cheer us for a whole morning. For ours is a world of sharks and scorpions, and we are a pair of dull, ethical fools who, everyone says so, could make a lot more money than we do. Which is no doubt true, but what would we do with more money? Bernard, after all, spent most of his life practically drowning in wealth, and I have everything I want. Truly I do. I have escaped that naive, idealistic, anxious young woman, my former self, neurotically devoted to art like a novice nun to God. Debasement and ambition are two sides of the same heavy coin, but I have changed currencies. I have shed my chrysalis and become not a butterfly, but a happy moth fluttering my brown wings peacefully through the dusk. And here is Bernard beside me, though too heavy to be a fellow moth, perhaps. Make him a possum, then, ambling along under the yellow moon while I flit just above his ear. It's a peaceful, pleasant, predictable life, as long as we avoid the hypnotic dazzle of the freeway lights. And of course, we both follow the option prices. We keep a special eye out for those names who used to show up at Naquasset, some of which belong to superstars now. And then at 10, Scarlett jangles open the door, music leaking from her earbuds, wearing something outrageous we can tut over admiringly, a low-cut sheath of fuchsia lame, a high-necked vintage dress of patched and faded lace. I used to think she frequented secret midnight boutiques and underground seamstresses, But now I know she buys it all on the internet. Every month or two as well, she radically rethinks her hair, altering its color and its shape, still young enough to believe a person can actually change. Scarlett makes us laugh. In return, we pet her and fuss over her and give her advice to which she pretends not to listen. She's wonderful with the customers. What does she think of us, two eccentrics growing slowly older in a business that are suited to the young? Does she suspect we might once have done things, wanted things, things for which we were willing to risk everything? How does she describe us to her friends, those hipster graffiti artists, vegans, performance poets, and app designers with whom she texts all day? Probably she doesn't talk about us at all.